We're joined from Cairo by the international affairs expert, Dr. Mohamad Osman. Welcome to Q News, Mr. Mohamad.
Thank you for having me, Salma.
Thank you. And let me first of all ask you, what are the possible scenarios do you think we might be seeing in the upcoming days?
It seems that President Yoon, the South Korean president, attempted to carry out a power grab, the first of its kind since the country's transition to democracy in the late 1980s. And it ultimately failed at the end of the day. So what we expect in the next few days, the opposition is moving to impeach President Yoon. And this is a possibility since there are precedents of presidents resigning before their terms expired in the recent history of South Korea. Also, South Korean civil society, including the unions, are mobilizing and declaring a general strike to potentially overthrow, impeach, calling for the impeachment and the resignation of President Yoon. And even his own party, it seems, abandoned him, and they disowned his decision to unilaterally declare martial law.
But Dr. Mohamad, who steps in if South Korea's president is forced out?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
Who steps in if South Korea's president is forced out?
Temporarily, according to the South Korean constitution, the prime minister assumes the responsibilities of an acting president until a new president is elected, in case the president is actually impeached.
Okay, and if you can tell us as well briefly what prompted South Korea's president to declare actually martial law initially?
Since the election of President Yoon in 2022, the government has basically been paralyzed because the parliament was controlled and is controlled by the South Korean opposition led by the Democratic Party. And it seems that President Yoon had a huge problem with the opposition, and he was not being able to reach any consensus with the country's parliament, and thus he was not able to pass a lot of budgets, for example, which was hampering the functioning of the state and the state's economy, according to President Yoon. Okay. And this is what prompted him to go on and go ahead with his power grab, saying that this was part of a larger plot to disrupt the country and that they were North Korean agents and this kind of narrative. However, of course, this is political talk, and it's very unlikely that the opposition is linked to North Korea. However, this was the reasoning behind it, and he was basically trying to suspend parliament and the political life altogether so that he can run the country as he sees fits. But as we saw, this spectacularly backfired, and he was rendered unable within less than 6 hours to go ahead with his plans.
And what do you think would be the potential maybe of the international consequences that might this incident have on South Korea's relations with neighboring nations?
For example, for South Korea's opponents like North Korea or China, it doesn't matter. It actually gives them pleasure to see any kind of instability inside South Korea, especially that President Yoon has been adopting a very hardline stance towards South Korea, and the complete opposite to President Moon, his predecessor, for example. And the Chinese as well are not happy with the policies of South Korea recently, with their deepening of their security relationship with the United States and their position vis-a-vis Taiwan and Ukraine as well, which is angering the Chinese China. So China does not would not see a lot of displeasure in any periodic instability. However, of course, any drastic instability or collapse in South Korea will have disastrous economic consequences, and China will be affected definitely because it's one of its major trade partners. As for Japan, for example, they will be very concerned because despite their differences, South Korea is a staunch ally of Japan, and they have mutual security interests within the U.S. security framework in East Asia in general, in order to confront what they perceive as Chinese expansionism.
Dr. Mohamad, also, where do you think does the U.S. Perceive its alliance with South Korea amid these political tensions?
What happened in South Korea yesterday night was a huge embarrassment to the Biden administration because The United States in general always boasts that its allies are functioning democracies, and South Korea was a success story of a country of institutions, of rule of law, of democracy, as opposed to what they see as a totalitarian government in North Korea, or that's how they see it at least. Now, with what's going on, an attempt basically to suspend the constitutional powers of parliament and impose control over the media and limit the work of the political parties or even suspend them by President Yoon yesterday is a huge embarrassment to the United States, especially to the Democratic administration that champions in the United States, of course, that usually champions the values of democracy and the spreading of democratic values and the democratization in the world, especially in the global south in general. So it serves as an embarrassment. But since this crisis has largely been settled, and since President Yoon did not succeed in imposing martial law successfully and suspending political life, I think they will manage to survive that. And the U.S.-South Korea relationship will not be drastically hampered.
Well, from Cairo, that was the international affairs expert, Dr. Mohamad Osman.